So maybe some of you have heard of this kind of thing. They call it photoshopped, or there's a lot of words for it. Um, there's a couple things going on with these kinds of images. A lot of them have to do with just facial stuff, changing out the skin. I'm just zooming in really quick on this, but you know, and this is kind of like an effect of using the average colors of the skin and creating kind of an average color, creating a blur, um, and you get these like almost like plastic looking skin tones or skins, and some people are better than others. Oftentimes there's ways to grab some of the freckles and bring them back in a little, but that's one aspect of this kind of work, but then there's other aspects like this one where, um, just straight up really changing the shape of a face. Um, so the changing of the face, or there's also bodies that are changed this way. You know, there's some people that are pretty obviously different looking when you see them in real life and when they aren't. And so they call it Photoshop, and I think most of you have probably heard of it. Um, so this is one of the tool that kind of does that, but there's a couple ways to use it. And I think maybe when you're doing this kind of work, it's a little questionable, what are we actually doing when we're defining the look of somebody. But I think in some ways this tool gets a little bit of a bad rap because of this type of work. But there's some other reasons to use it, so I thought I'd show you some of the other ways to go about using this tool. And I am going to actually distort this image pretty intensely, but I want you guys to think about how when we were drawing, we did use a lot of distortions. Like we were, for instance, we were doing things like let's go on a background. Let's duplicate this layer. Um, we were doing things like uh, scaling, and so that we could have different size, like portions of our, we were doing rotations, and we were doing some things like that. We were doing some warping to kind of change things. And when we were drawing, we were getting pretty good effect, and we were finding, oh, that's kind of cool actually, that we can do a drawing and then really change our shape a lot, and not be so stuck with the image that we drew to begin with, but have a lot of flexibility afterwards to create a totally different drawing. So remember, we were working with a tree and just really changing things out. You can see that it's really pretty adjustable with these types of tools, right? But not very targeted in its distortions. So I'll accept that. Now, that's one way to deal with this, right? So I can play around with that and get some pretty good distortions, but it's a very generalized distortion. Let me duplicate this layer one more time, doing Command J, or that's in layer, new layer via copy, or Command J. I'll throw that one away. So this is called Liquify, and this is the first time I'm using a filter in this class, and I think probably along with, I mentioned earlier in the other, or maybe later in the other video, depending on the order you watch, but I talked about the crop for a moment. There's a couple tools that we're going to talk about that are more esoteric, that come up but are maybe a little bit less. But filters are one of those things. We haven't really talked about them. There's a lot of them, actually, and there's a lot of really good reasons to use these. Some are really amazing. Some do things that you just you can't live without. Like especially some of these, like high pass is a really common tool. Same with offset is a great tool for pattern making or texture creation for tiling. These ones, really, quite honestly, a lot of these right here are really useful, and for um, different types of processes that you might want to do. Some of them are a little less, they're more weird, like some of the stylized ones, for instance, might be they're cool, but they're they're whatever. I'll leave it at that. But some of these others are pretty awesome. Pixelates are kind of cool, but again, kind of like the stylized. Just really common now, and you just see them all over. But noise is really great. Distort is really great. Blur is really awesome. We bring that up with bringing images together. But we'll talk more about these when we do really honest to goodness compositions with composites. But the one I want to talk about today is Liquify. And so this is Liquify. I'm going to go to the filter and just go, well, it's the top one because I just used it. If so whatever your last filter is going to show at the top here. But this is where it normally is right here. It's called Liquify. And this is the tool people are using for all that Photoshop stuff and changing things. And I'm not going to really go into any of the settings in this tool. It's really very detailed. There's a lot of stuff to it. If you want to look into it, I would suggest you do so. But the main one I'm going to use is just this forward warp. But you can see there's reconstruct, and there's smooth, and there's pucker, and there's bloat, and there's all kinds of stuff here. So also, if you're working with a face, it has like this whole facial recognition tool, and I don't really want to get into changing people's faces that much, but I'm going to just kind of play with this one eye. Now the scenario I'm trying to sort of consider is I drew this eye, and I'm really happy with the eye, but I just want to kind of play with, want to get it to look a little bit different, or show how when you're drawing in Photoshop, how you can manipulate the image digitally after you've drawn to take advantage of the tools so you can get a little bit more shape out of it. So here we go. The forward warp tool is all I'm working with, and basically it's a brush again, so just remember you can change the size of the brush. And obviously there's some pressure here and stuff like that, density. You can play around with those a little bit, but the idea of it is that it just kind of grabs pixels and it pulls them. So I'm just going to kind of, maybe I want to get a little bit more fuller eye here. Maybe the cool thing is that you can almost not, if you're really careful, you can really not tell that you did it. Maybe we'll pull this over a little bit. And the great thing is that it actually, it just takes into account all the pixels around, and it just stretches them, and it's very targeted. And depending on how small you get the brush, you can really be very targeted, right, in your changes, right? And you can, it's almost like you're just pulling the drawing around, and you can be very subtle. And that's why some of these Photoshop documents are really difficult to tell that someone's made a change. It's going to be really paying attention to this, that this has happened, because the distortions are really difficult to find. Let's see a bigger. Let's say maybe I want to get this eyebrow to have a little bit more. Even pull the shading part of this drawing so that hopefully it doesn't show as much. Maybe try and get this a little bit bigger. And notice how if it's bigger, you can grab more of the pixels. Try and get more arch. Get a little thicker and put that a little bit more. And then maybe I can grab these eyelashes and just lengthen them, and I'll just kind of just pull these down. And you can see how this is going to really kind of pull this part of the drawing down with it. So maybe it's not as effective to do this part, but um, can still pull in between there and pull the actual shading part too, and redraw the shading part as well. Kind of crazy. Um, okay. A little bit longer. It's a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger. It's going to be a little bit hard in the pupil area. It's going to want to try and a little bit of some bumps there. Let's try and smooth that out a little bit. Bring this a little bit smaller and just kind of try and pull it tighter. That looks a little bit funny. Put it back down a little bit. It's almost like working with clay. You know, it's just kind of stretching and pulling a little bit, reconstructing your drawing, right? You can really you can mess around with that area. It looks pretty crazy that way. I think I just kind of like it right there. Maybe pull this out a little bit. Okay, that's basically it. That's the Liquify tool. You just say okay, and there we go. That's the difference. I don't think mine looks better. But you know, the point being is that you can really change these things around, right? And that's the idea. It's just that you can mess with the Liquify. And for some of you, this might be a really good way to get a different look out of some of the things you're doing. Probably should have used this in the drawing section, but I didn't want to get you guys too caught up in that. Feels like maybe a funny place to bring it into the class, but try it out for a little bit, see what you can do. I'd like you guys to do is pick out an image, and it can either be a hand-drawn image or something from the internet, and try it out. One idea I have seen is this one, which I'll bring up here real quick, is I thought this one was pretty cool. Kid drawings, Photoshop. Pretty funny. These are like somebody went through and they find kid drawings, and then they make Photoshop versions of the kid drawings. I don't know if they're real or not. Kid drawings, or they kind of look like it. They're pretty funny, some of them, and you could kind of do these a little bit with the with this tool. So I'm gonna leave you there with that, and that might be like a fun project to work on, is working, doing some animals or something like that, and just having fun with it. So, um, yeah, that's the Liquify.